Click the bell icon to get latest videos from Ekeeda.
Hello friends, we'll be learning about different types of errors that we'll be going through when it comes to rectification of errors. Let's understand what kind of errors we have and how do we analyze these errors. So to start with, we have four types of errors. When it comes to rectification of errors, we'll be dealing with four kinds of errors, and these errors will be something that we need to rectify, and we need to understand what kind of errors these are. So let's go ahead and see what kind of errors we'll be dealing with. The first error being error of commission, second being error of omission, the third being error of principal, and the fourth being compensating errors. Now, all these errors are the major categories of errors that we'll be dealing with. So, it may be error of commission, error of omission, error of principal, or compensating errors. Some of these errors affect trial balance, some of them don't. So, what we'll be doing right now is that we'll be understanding each and error so that we understand how these errors affect the trial balance, what is the rectification process that we need to follow, what are the examples that fall under the category of each of these, and what can be done to identify these errors. So now the first error that we'll be dealing with is error of commission. Now when we talk about error of commission, what does error of commission mean? So as we have mentioned here, due to wrong posting, wrong totaling, wrong account, wrong amount being mentioned in the ledger balance or in the journal entries, these errors are known as error of commission. They constitute error of commission with the simple reason being the wrong amount has been debited or credited, the wrong account has been debited with the wrong amount, or the wrong account has been debited with the right amount. It may be either debit or credit into the wrong account, or wrong debit or wrong credit into the correct account being done. If you find any such error, that means that error is an error of commission. We have an example here. Let's go through that example and find out how this error can be classified as error of commission. We have Mr. A. Mr. A has paid 25,000 to Mr. B, who is a supplier. However, when we have mentioned this error into the journal entry, we have classified it as an error of commission because of one specific error that has been done. Let's find out what that error is. As we mentioned that this transaction was correctly recorded, however, instead of debiting 25,000 to Mr. B's account, we have debited the amount as 2,500. Now, when this transaction was posted into the journal, the transaction was posted correctly. However, when it comes to mentioning the account in the trial balance or in the ledger, instead of 25,000, we have mentioned it as 2,500. So, the purchase transaction or the sale transaction, any transaction which relates to this. So, if you have paid amount to Mr. B, who is a supplier, that means we have purchased something from him. So, the purchase account was correctly debited as 25,000. However, the B's account was credited with the amount of 2,500 itself. That means one account will hold a balance of 25,000 and the other account will hold a balance of 2,500 only. This is the difference, and that's why this difference or this error is known as error of commission. This will affect the balance, that is the ledger balance as well as the trial balance preparation. So when error of commission is the classification or is the error, you need to understand that this specific error will affect the trial balance. So this is one of the feature of the trial balance, or probably the error of commission, that it affects the trial balance. So any error of commission, be it wrong posting, wrong totaling, wrong amount being credited or debited into the right account, or wrong amount being credited into the debit account or the credit account of any correct account it may be. So all these errors constitute error of commission, and to remember, this account absolutely, or this error absolutely goes ahead with affecting the trial balance. Let's go ahead and see what the next kind of error is. As we have learned error of commission, the next one will be error of omission. Errors which are omitted completely, those are known as complete omission. And errors which are noted or probably just mentioned partially, these are known as partial omission. So when we talk about error of omission, there are two kinds of errors in it. One that is completely omitted, second being partially omitted. any transaction which you have omitted for recording. That means if a purchase transaction has been done, if the previous example was taken where we paid 25,000 to Mr. B for purchasing certain goods. So when the purchase transaction happens, and if you have just recorded one side of this transaction, that means the purchase transaction has been mentioned as partially omission. If this transaction has been completely taken off the book, that means the transaction has happened, however, you have not recorded the transaction at all. That means that's an error of complete omission. So the difference only here states that one transaction is being completely taken off the book and the other transaction is partially mentioned in the books of account. That's why when we talk about error of omission, it may be of two kinds. One being error of complete omission, second being error of partial omission. Now, which of these affect trial balance? One, that is error of complete omission, will not affect your trial balance because you didn't give that journal entry at all. You didn't post that transaction into the ledgers, into the trial balance at all. Hence, if the error has been completely taken off the book, that means that specific error will not be shown or will not be rectified or will not reflect in trial balance, and hence it doesn't affect the totaling of trial balance at all. However, if there is a partial error or the partial omission error that has been committed, in such cases, yes, the trial balance will be affected here. Hence, when we talk about error of omission, two errors, error of complete omission and error of partial omission. Complete omission has no effect on trial balance, however partial omission will have effect on trial balance as well. Let's go ahead and find out the third error and the description of that specific error. So now that we have already found out about error of commission, error of omission, which is like complete omission or partial omission, let's go on to the third error that we are talking about. The golden rule relates to three accounts, one being real account, nominal account and personal account. There are certain rules that we need to follow when it comes to real account, personal account or nominal account. For example, if personal account is there, then there is a specific formula that we need to follow. Debit the receiver, credit the giver. If this rule isn't followed, that means that account has encountered the error of principle. If the real account is there and if the principle is not followed, that means debit what comes in, credit what goes out. In such scenarios, error of principle occurs here as well. And the same thing goes for nominal account when it comes to debit all expenses and losses, credit all incomes and gains. In such a scenario, when we talk about debit all expenses and losses or credit all incomes and gains, if this thing is not followed, then in such cases we need to understand that there is an error of principle. So these three golden rules that you need to follow for real account, nominal account or personal account, when you encounter any kind of error in here, that means you are encountering error of principle. Hence, when we talk about error of principle, it means there has been an error in wrong posting regarding all these three accounts. Let's go ahead and find out what are the different mentions or categories that we have mentioned here. Supposingly, there is an incorrect classification of revenues, income, capital or expenses to be noted down. If the expenses have been termed as incomes and if the incomes have been termed as expenses, or if the capital account has been mentioned as a revenue account and has been credited and debited accordingly, in such cases, you are encountering an error of principle. So when you talk about error of principle, it is nothing but all these things needs to be found out or all these things need to be understood in a specific way and the wrong account has to be rectified with the correct journal entry. Or if there is a wrong amount which has been credited to the correct account or debited to the correct account, it has to be rectified in that specific way. Hence, these three golden rules, that is the one for real, personal and nominal account, has to be followed in a specified way itself. Just to make you understand, these three golden rules form the base of any journal entries that you make. Hence, when it comes to journal entries preparation, you need to make sure that all these three rules are completely followed. To our surprise, error of principle does not affect the trial balance at all. The reason being, the amount may be wrong, however, it affects both the balances. Hence, if there is a purchase transaction which has been mentioned, if both the accounts have been mentioned with 2500 itself instead of 25,000, hence this specific transaction will not affect trial balance totaling, because both the accounts, it may be debit or credit. If you have debited that account which was ideally supposed to be credited, that means the account which was supposed to be debited has been credited. Hence, it's a nil effect, and that's the reason this specific error does not affect the trial balance at all. However, it is still an error because a purchase transaction has been recorded into the sales transaction constitutes an error of principle. That is the rectification that is required here. Now let's go ahead and see the fourth kind of error what we are talking about, which is compensating error. When we talk about compensating error, that means two or more entries are setting off the errors right here. For example, if we have to take one of the entry where the purchase transaction has been debited instead of the same account being credited or debited. Let's give you an example briefly here. Like, we have purchased something from a supplier. However, that has been mentioned in the supplier's transaction or as a sales transaction, and the sales transaction has been mentioned as a purchase transaction for the same amount. That means this error is an compensating error, whereby the amount being the same, the transactions are absolutely complementing each other. Hence, it is known as a compensating error, whereby one error and the other error constitutes or complements each other and the effect is nil. Hence, this specific error is known as a compensating error. When you talk about compensating error, you need to understand or you need to make sure that at any point of time, two or more journal entries or two or more transactions are affecting in such a way whereby one transaction is increasing the volume and the other transaction is decreasing the volume. That means there is a net set off done here. Instead, if supposingly one of the transaction is increasing the profit, however, other transaction is decreasing the profit, that means it is creating a net effect where the profit becomes zero, which was the ideal situation that was required if we are dealing with loss and profit both of the similar amount. Hence, these transactions have no effect when it comes to compensating error. That's the reason these are known as compensating, because they compensate each other or they complement each other's errors. That's the reason these are the four kind of errors that we are discussing about. So what we have learned in this video are what are the four types of errors that we'll be dealing with. First being the error of commission. Second being the error of omission, which may include partial or complete omission. Third being the error of principle, and the fourth and the last being compensating error. So these video will give you a description of how these specific errors will affect the trial balance or will not affect the trial balance. Now, that's what we have learned today for the day. So, what are the kind of errors and how to deal with these errors? And when it comes to affection on the trial balance, which of these do affect the trial balance in all the cases? That's the reason these four errors are the major complementary errors, or probably the major important errors when we talk about rectification of errors. That's what you have learned for the day, and that's it for the day. Thank you for watching Ekeeda. Stay tuned to Ekeeda and do subscribe to Ekeeda.